So it all depends, and then you could just flow from there.
Glad that we're finally doing this. And again, it's lovely to meet you as well. I had the opportunity to see a couple of, your podcasts, not entirely, but like, the last one that you mentioned.
What do you think about it?
I liked how you go in detail about it, but still it's a conversation around not just the technical part of, like the job, but also largely how those roles fit in our lives and how also life revolves in adjacent to what we're doing at work as well.
It's nice to have you here today on our podcast. If you can tell us a bit about yourself, what brought you to the space technologies and innovation, and who you are today and what you do.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to, connect with you and just really be a part of the conversation that you're having. My story is, I'd like to think it's interesting, but I guess your audience is going to be the decision maker here. So I'm from Pakistan, and I started my career in marketing at a time, and this is obviously decades ago. I don't want to say how many decades ago, but when I graduated, it was really this passion I had for marketing and comms. And I did a lot of work around that as well. I did, public relations strategy, marketing behavior. For a while in the first decade of my career, I dabbled really into political communication, which I really loved because I think that is when I started to realize really the power of marketing and comms. And then I think that my last stint in marketing was with IBM. I was leading their AI and IoT solutions marketing in the MENA region. And that was fascinating because this was in 2016, 2017, when AI was not really a focus for a lot of companies and individuals. And so here I am leading a very small group and trying to convince clients that, hey, they need to get on this AI bandwagon. And at that time, I guess it wasn't a bandwagon. It was this new signal that was coming up, right? Where people are automating stuff, where there is, algorithms that are looking at context and trying to decode and solve problems. And so I think that is when a pivot in my career and my life started. I just became really obsessed and passionate about how emerging technology is really changing our lives and how it's creating value. And at that time, AI was a new field, and I guess I wasn't getting enough marketing dollars to do crazy stuff. So I started going to a lot of client meetings and telling them about what AI can do. I started going on a lot of events and getting on stage and trying to convince people about the impact of artificial intelligence and IoT. And I think at that point, I realized, I love doing it. I love talking about value creation. And that is when I made a move to consulting. I started working with innovation consulting, where we started really talking about how can actually companies understand those signals of change, what kind of emerging technologies they can apply in their everyday lives and their roadmaps. And so that was a deep dive in innovation, and that really started my journey. And I started working with different clients on how they're going to grow their innovation, what kind of people they need, what cultures are there, what kind of products make sense to them. And I did that with some heavy consulting companies. And then I guess I had this epiphany that all of my work and life was just concentrated on working. And I think that a lot of us can relate to it. So I took a break, and then when I came back, I realized, I don't want to work for those major companies. And then I decided to start my own consulting.
Oh, I'm going to hold you for a second because that is, when we get to that terrain of the break that you took, that is an entire different conversation that I want to delve into in depth. But the transition from marketing into technology, so you've always been in a position to direct the conversation, but was it a difficult transition moving into tech? Or what was that transition like for you?
That's a really good question. And I get that question a lot because it's true that if you look at my life, right, that I've pivoted to different angles. And yes, from marketing to tech, it was a very massive change. And I think for me, is that I've always been tuned to, understanding what's changing, whether it's in the political climate or in the tech climate or just in demographics, right? What are those changes that are taking place? And for me, it was more, even when I decided to join that technology firm, I'm missing out on this whole digital phase because I had done 2 masters and they had nothing to do with technology. And then I'm seeing everyone take over this, the conversations are happening digitally. And I realized, well, I can't do my 3rd master. So how do I get it? How do I learn? And so that's when I decided to join that technology company. But it was really this need, right? That, hey, you got to keep moving. You got to understand where this world is changing. And for me, I've always felt very comfortable in areas where they're just exploratory. Like trying to make sense of things. It's just been really like a part of my personality. And so that's how I ventured into tech, because the kind of tech that I've done, it's not that I'm a software engineer. I don't build technology. It's more on understanding the new technology that's coming in and what it can do for us as humans, as companies. So I guess that was a bit of my personality that cued me that, hey, this is an angle you should pursue. And so my decision to go from marketing to tech was not because I wanted to get into tech, but I understood that things were changing and I need to understand what this next phase of our generation is going to be.
For individuals, I think it's not easy, but it's easier for an individual to re-pivot, if I could use that word. But for organizations who see what's happening out there and decide to move or decide to change or decide to innovate, that's where we see a lot of challenges. And you've worked with organizations in the innovation space. What do you see is like a major driving force for organizations to innovate? Is it competition? Is it the buzz out there? Because there's so much going on right there, out there in the market. Not too long ago, we heard about NFTs. And I haven't really heard about that in a while. So what happened to that? It happens in practice. It happens in solutions. So how do we manage the buzz versus reality, what we should actually be doing and innovating towards?
I think a lot of the times it's also the personality of the company, right? There are companies that are new, that are agile, where the leadership is, they want to be a part of that conversation or that signal that's happening. And you see those companies willing to put in the money and investing, even if it's not going to be a direct ROI, right? Like you see those companies, and so those have a different appetite when it comes to innovation, right? They're going to go in, they're going to experiment on things because they want to be the leaders. They want to grab the opportunity before it becomes the status quo. And you'll have certain companies doing that. But then there are other companies where they are, I wouldn't say they're delayed, but it's in their business model to figure out the risk and say that, now it has become a business model, it has become stabilized, and this is now I'm gonna play a part in this. And I know that this is a lot of theory, but I'll break it up a little bit, right? Because I work with a lot of companies in figuring out how do you figure out what are the signals and what signals are applicable to you. And so for me, within my company 21P, we have a framework on how do you identify different signals for innovation. And we have a 3-step identification framework where you go from signals to the different shifts to the systems that are being created.
So signal, shift, systems. But what is a signal?
Signals are those anecdotal conversations or activities that are happening regarding some change. They are outliers in the system. They are things that, for example, NFTs, right? You have different pockets of demographics which are either in games, they are buying, digital assets. Then you've got, maybe, for example, Gucci created a digital asset. So it's not status quo, but there are these outliers that are now trending, right?
Can we say that the signals is the hypes?
You can say that, yes, it's the hype. But it would be there, you would start to see it being frequented a bit more. But I think that hype is a simplistic but still relevant way to say it. Then you've got, after signals, you've got these shifts. This is where you would see, the same signal creating clusters. So there's a lot more activity happening, and that is translating into other aspects of, other aspects. For example, you created a technology, NFT, now it's being permeated into demographics. That generation alpha is using it a little bit more. It's being picked up by a lot of fashion houses, right? So that is where the shift starts to happen, where there's a clustering. There are certain policies that are now in place. For example, VARA, right? Digital assets regulation is happening and they're coming up. But then the third point is when they actually start creating systems out of those, trends, right? So the trends turn to clusters. Now the clusters actually turn into business models. And this is where we look at not NFTs, but digital assets, right? Because that's the core technology. And so digital assets are now being permeated into a way of work for a lot of things. You know that DED, Dubai Economic Department, or Dubai Land Department is using digital assets for leasing agreements and all of that. You've got this company, Pripco, right, that came up with their whole, fragmentation and digital assets and ownership as well. So now you see that there are actual business models that are being built on digital assets. And this is where you know that a trend that was just a signal is now being permeated into this space. And so when we created this structure, right, we started applying it on a lot of like older technologies like AI, and it started to make sense. So this is where I start to have conversations with companies on what is that innovation process or landscape looking like. And then it really depends, again, on the company's personality. Do you really want to get into the signal space?
That's what I was going to ask you. Because is it beneficial to disregard some signals? Because again, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of hype, for lack of a better word. So in that decision-making process to say, do you want to get into this? Do you also advise organizations saying, probably this isn't that signal that you should buy into right now? Does that make sense?
Or maybe there are type of organizations that actually
Not
jump
suited.
in, to get the signals, or they will just back up and wait and observe when the signal will be shifting, and then when it will become the systems.
And that is where I mentioned the personality type of the organization comes in play. And I use personality in a very simplistic way to kind of reflect on what is those governance system, what is their risk appetite, what is their leadership vision, and what is their mission, right? You've got companies like OpenAI, right? Is that they are really front end, right? So for them, their whole business model and their whole, I would say, existence is being ahead of the curve, right? That you need to pick on certain things and explore that as well. And then you've got certain companies where they might be risk averse, but they also might have a lot of governance. They might not have the budgets or different things, right? And then they wait until there's a system view, right? That it has become business as usual. So they go into that as well. So there are a lot of elements at play to help companies understand where exactly do they fall in.
In a very simplistic way, can we say that startups are actually looking for the signals and they're reacting faster compared to the mature organizations that will wait till it became the system and then they will kind of onboard that technologies or innovation?
I haven't done the research on this, but I think that largely we also need to look at startups from a demographic point, like a regional point of view. So you always hear, right, that startups that are maybe in different geographic regions, they are looking at, maybe cutting at startups somewhere else, and then they're saying, oh, you know what, I see that signal, the signal is picking up, and now I want to, be a part of it, right? So it also aligns, right, that startups who are entering into that signal also have cutting edge research, right? Because they need to back it with something. Yeah. So you would see, again, I don't have the stats to prove it, but I would assume that, a lot of startups, for example, in US are going to be in the signals mode versus startups somewhere else in the region where they don't have a lot of R&D capacity might wait for the systems and business models to be approved to start taking it to market.
Can we say the same about the governments? Like some governments are more open to react to the signals compared to the others?
I think generally governments would be not so open about leaping into signals, and they would probably wait for the systems to come in place. Why? Is because the role of the government is not to be innovative, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, we're living in a country which is not, which is completely an outlier, and maybe that's another conversation, right? That governments are now turning into innovation bodies. So where you have a signal, right? Dubai is sending a signal, UAE is sending a signal. But otherwise, the traditional model of the government has always been that, hey, we're going to create an environment that would allow innovation to kind of thrive. So you would see that in larger, governments that we know, for example, in the West or in other parts of the world as well, they would create an environment. But for them to put, money behind a signal might not be the first approach. But what they are required to do is create environments where signals are being researched upon, where signals have the opportunity to thrive, where regulation, is conducive to innovation.
Or give a space for experimentation.
Absolutely.
So how do we translate this to organizations? I mean, I understand how a government will try and create the right ecosystems for thriving organizations, thriving businesses. I mean, Dubai, we've been here for over a decade. I think everyone on this table has been here for a while. And what makes Dubai new and refreshing is the fact that Dubai is continuously changing, but because the government has created that environment that encourages that. But in some organizations, maybe we could have a small team in a room somewhere, and then we call that the innovation team. But that team is going to be creating a lot of crazy ideas that is going to disrupt what people do 8 to 5.
Yeah.
So again, how do you enable that?
I think, so that's super important in the sense that we know that for any company to succeed and sustain their success in the long run, they need to keep their eyes open, right, for innovation, because they might get, superseded by a competition. Their business model might get, destroyed, or might just get old, right, redundant. So we know that companies need to have an eye on what's going on and where exactly do the steps. Now, there can be a model where a lot of companies are working towards, right, that they have an innovation department, right? And the thing with an innovation department are a couple of folks just dedicated to innovation, right? It's not, for me, it's not really the most successful approach. Why? Is because the more innovation we're seeing now requires interdisciplinary point of views, right? So you want different aspects of the companies to be a part of that innovation conversation. So the first point would be that companies need to essentially create a culture of innovation. Now, this is probably the most redundant, cliched lines that we hear in innovation. Oh, you need to have an innovation culture, right? And, it doesn't require major campaigns. It just requires those micro practices that leaders in these organizations need to be responsible for integrating. And what do I mean by these micro practices, right? Starting a meeting. And this is something that I've actually been thinking about, because I'm just going to go on a tangent that there was this recent report that came up that artificial intelligence, AI, Gen AI, OpenAI, like ChatGPT, right? It's making people use only one aspect of the brain, right? So essentially, we're all dumbing down. Yeah. This is a huge issue. Right? So a decade ago or a couple of years ago, when I was hosting these innovation workshops, a lot of the activities that I used to do was, hey, bunch of Legos, let's do teamwork and create something. Yeah. I think more and more we need to start integrating questions, critical questions or whatever, that start using our brain. So if you're starting a meeting, you open that meeting with just a random fun question that asks people to activate their brain, a bit.
It sounds all great and good. It sounds great after the first, second month of doing it, but at some point it becomes a cliche as well. You talk about micro actions, but it has to be micro consistent actions over a long period of time, because
which are being rewarded.
Oh, perfect. Because how does it become a cultural part of the culture of the organization? So reward is a good point.
And you don't need to give out major rewards, right? I mean, honestly, this is just a simple case of conditioning as well. I mean, we know that Pavlov's theory, right? You start rewarding the dog to create a certain behavior. Eventually, it adapts that behavior, right? So we have these proven studies, right? And we know for a fact, right, that rewards work. But the thing is that the reward should not be on major innovation where you get a bunch of money and go execute it. No, it needs to be what are those micro practices and micro behaviors you want to inculcate in your organization. Because essentially, right, for companies to succeed in the innovation space, a lot of the people in your company just need to be super excited, right? To contribute, to think of ideas, to feel that they have a safe space. So that element of micro practices and behaviors is just one small element of, how do you make an innovation organization?
How to fight the fear of the failure? Because most of the innovative ideas, they tend to fail for one or another reason, but then the organization having these micro practices, micro innovations, how they can just drive it without the fear?
You make a very valid point, and I think that there's been studies that show that a lot of digital transformation projects just fail. And one point of view is that a lot of the times these projects or these initiatives do not have a governance model attached to it, right? And they don't have a plan of execution. So once you have an idea and you throw a bunch of money and then you're asking the team to go for it, right? They're companies who have created governance systems and processes around, the idea is done, let's execute it, right? They are the ones who are going to succeed. And one thing I've also realized, right, is the people who create the big ideas and are able to link it together might not be the best people to take it through. Right? Because sometimes people who are innovative and they're very, all about ideas, right? They wouldn't want to go into the day-to-day. Like once their idea has been validated, is there an option to bring in another team that has a better track record of executing? Because creating like an idea or a prototype is different than releasing an MVP into the market, right? That is a science. That is like particular steps and to-dos that you need to do.
So back in the days, because how does innovation differ from continuous improvement? In previous companies I had worked on, there's this buzz around Lean Six Sigma, and there's this drive around getting employees in the organization to find out how we can fix broken systems, remove waste, so on and so forth.
I think everybody has their different point of views, right? You would probably go online and you find 10 different descriptions of what innovation is. And for me, innovation is about creating new forms of value, right? There's some additional value. It might be productivity. It might be, a completely new business model. It can be like a completely new idea and product, right? So I'm in the camp that thinks that any kind of value creation is innovation. So in my sphere of thinking, innovation, continuous improvement is a form of innovation. Now we can have a conversation about what is that impact of that innovation, right? So the impact of like continuous, improvement might be a different measurement criteria than really thinking of a new product and idea.
Commercial product, yeah.
But ultimately, in my view, anything that creates value, whether it's productivity, enhancement, customer experience, growth, or profitability, there should all be measured under innovation.
I like the fact that you talked about the team that generates the idea doesn't have to implement the solution. How do you structure an organization to be innovative? Do you just have a team that is responsible for innovations, that leverages the ideas from the organization? What's an ideal scenario?
I think for companies, it really depends, right? We go in detail and we do a lot of due diligence and analyses and assessment of what is their current innovation status looking like, right? Do they have the right team to be innovative? Do they have the right culture? Maybe, for a lot of organizations, we recommend that, your team is not ready for innovation. You need to look out. And this is where they do collaboration with startups, right?
Tell me about that conversation. Your team is not ready for innovation.
Yeah, because for a lot of companies, right, is that they don't have the built-in practice that encourage ideation. For them, we go on step one in teaching skills. We do a lot of workshops. We take a cohort of individuals, and then we take them through the whole value chain, right? Because, it's not innovation, it's just thinking of ideas, right? There's a whole process behind it, and a lot of companies are not equipped to do that. So while you're helping them set up and inculcate those cultures and processes and strategy of innovation, at the same time, they cannot just wait for their teams or their company to get ready. And this is where you've got a lot of CVCs, right? Corporate venture capitalists. You've got a lot of collaboration with startups going on as well. So companies should be very open to looking at different, ecosystems and networks and partnerships to bring innovation on board and maybe expedite that as well. So that's like another way of looking at it. You already see, right? There are a lot of companies that would acquire a company for its talent to come on board.
In this sort of acquisitions or the partnership, let's say, how is better to manage the communication? Because when innovation comes, the understanding of what that innovation or what that change might differ from the team that is coming and the team that you already have in the organization. And there might be a lot of miscommunication happening, pushback, let's say, and maybe the teams will be absolutely isolated in a way and it will not be an organization anymore.
I know where you're getting at, because we see story after story of companies acquiring other companies, and there's this massive cultural, difference, right, on cultures, and it's very difficult for the original startup to be integrated into the actual company, and you see this time and time again, right? So one way companies can do it is that, yes, you acquire certain individuals, but you don't integrate them as your own company. And then you put them as, a side unit or a company, which are allowed to do their own thing. But at some point, the integration needs to be. So companies need to figure out what those processes. But you are absolutely right in identifying that, that is a major issue in terms of, the integration part.
When it comes to the individual's responsibility to be able to innovate. And we're going to talk about your travel, but versus you just being in the organization and then your innovation team shows up and says, hey guys, we have a new contest. We're going to call it Innovate Today or Innovate Tomorrow, and give us 10 ideas. How do we ensure it's self-generated?
It is, and also it goes back to your same question of innovation fatigue, right? Because so many companies are doing these innovation programs and innovation initiatives all the time, and it gets exhausting for a person. I just want to do my 9 to 5. Leave me alone. And that is absolutely legit, because some people just choose to have that balance. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we are in this world where it's changing rapidly. It's not the same time, right? I mean, if you look at the whole point where televisions were created in the 60s or 50s, don't judge me for not knowing when, but immediately it's digital, and digital it's AI and Gen AI. So the speed of change and innovation has been happening exponentially. And we keep on hearing these, fair tactics about what AI is going to do for jobs. I mean, whatever camp you're on. The reality is that jobs are being impacted by emerging tech, right? Or by the changes that are happening demographically, government policies, all of those things. So essentially, individuals know that at a certain point in time, you cannot just be okay with being okay with where you stand at a certain point in time. So they understand learning is essential to not just their job growth, but also their growth in this human ecosystem. And and when they know this, they know that, okay, even if you're not massively innovative or you're not coming up with ideas, you're on trend and you're learning what's happening around. I like to quote Satya Nadella on this, because he did the statement, let me remember, he said the statement that we went from a company from know-it-alls to learn-it-alls. And I think essentially that is just the core of any innovative company, is that you need to create a culture where people are just hungry for information and they just get excited about what's going on. And not everyone in your company is going to be innovative and is going to bring in ideas. But if you create like a culture enough where people are excited, right, that goes a long way.
And what we can suggest for the people who should unlearn certain skills in order to be more adaptive to the new world.
For the people, coming. For the employees themselves,
Like what kind of skills they should learn? Or
unlearn.
Unlearn. Oh, I'm a big fan of unlearning. I was telling Obi, like, if I would ever write a book, it's going to be about unlearning.
No, because again, Satya, it's still, the UAE creates an environment. Microsoft creates an environment. What does Obi have to do? To ensure that I'm not waiting for the environment. Like, what are specific things that I have to? You could say, listen, Obi, the writing is on the wall. If you don't unlearn, you're out of the door. But what can I do intentionally to ensure that I am not just waiting for things around me to change? I am innovative as an individual.
I think first, like as humans, and I think this applies for the work life and your personal life as well, as the openness to change is very important. I used to work with a colleague of mine, and we were moving from Windows computers, PCs, to Macs, and he was just stressed because he had to learn this whole new interface, right? And sometimes we don't realize, but we start becoming less prone to change because here it becomes very, very important. Why? Is because everything is changing, right? When I was a marketeer, today it's like Pinterest, and tomorrow it's like Meta, and now I have to start learning all these platforms. In my current role in innovation, it's still the same, and even now it's permeating into your your life,
Your
right?
personal life, yeah.
And so I think that the first thing individuals can do from a work and personal perspective is just be open to that change, but don't get overwhelmed by it. And I'll give you a very small example, right? Like my nanny, right? I mean, she also like, makes really good food for us. And I introduced her to ChatGPT, right? And so now instead of asking me what I should make, she just looks at the ingredients, puts them in ChatGPT, and she has an answer. Voila, okay, I'm going to prepare this. So I really admire that she kind of said, you know what, this is a new thing. I'm just going to step and explore that. So not being afraid of change and being exploratory just in your attitude, that would be the first step.
An innovation requires a level of exploration. I read somewhere, I can't remember where, but it requires a bit of crazy as well. You did something unconventional. I won't call it crazy, but it's something that we all desire to do. I want to do it, but I think I have a window of 2 years, and if I don't do it in 2 years, I may miss that window completely. You shut down work. You close your laptops. You're like, I'm done. I'm going to take a gap year. Can you just tell us about the why and how that experience was like, and how that contributed to you today?
Oh, that's amazing.
No, yes, it might take a whole 1 hour just to delve into that itself.
I think for me, so if I just recounted my story, right, from being a marketeer all the way to starting my own company. And one downside that I don't mention is that moving from marketing to tech, from then tech innovation to, artificial intelligence, and then, metaverse. I was heading metaverse for a company, right? All of these required like steep learning. I think I went overboard, right, on my acceptability to change and my exploratory nature. And sometimes it can be really like a baggage to carry. But it was really this and when you're making these steep changes, right, every two years, 3 years, where you make an impact, and then you're looking at what is that next level or interconnectivity that I want to explore, it takes a lot, it consumes a lot of your personality, a lot of your time. So for me, those jumps meant that I was working a lot. And also in consulting companies, we all know, right, that you don't have any balance. Let's just call it out. And so I went through that phase. And then I realized that my relationship with my son was different. As an anecdote, we had 60 people at my husband's 40th, right? Big party at our house. I went to sleep at 2 a.m. telling my friends that I have a meeting the next day. And I regret that, because that was a very special moment, right? And so when you're making those choices, one day I woke up and I said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm missing out on life. And that is when I went on this Vipassana meditation. I'm not a meditator, but I was there. I was away. We were not allowed to communicate for 10 days. And I didn't meditate, but because I was in this, I was away from life as usual, I had this epiphany that I cannot carry on and, see my life pass through. And so when I came back, I told my husband, we have to go for a gap year. And he was very much aligned. And we both resigned from our jobs. And took the kid and traveled for 11 months across 15 countries.
And among all the parts of the world, why you have selected Central and South America?
So we're avid travelers. One of the shared goals I have with my husband is that we both want to travel all the countries in the world. And one thing that we hadn't done a lot of was Central and South America. We had only done Chile and Peru. So first element was, okay, we're taking a year holiday, and we wanted to be concentrated in one region. Otherwise, you're moving a lot. And some people prefer to do that. But for us, it was more, so we decided that region. Also because there's a lot of mystique around it. It's exotic. It has a lot of cultures and colors. So I always wanted to explore that. And also it has a lot of very different animals. I love to see animals in their natural habitat. So to see penguins and all of those, jaguars, for example. Yeah, that was kind of made that decision happen.
How it changed you?
Honestly, I think Obi and I, we were having that conversation where I told him that I loved living in Abu Dhabi just because the pace of life was different. Like, you could choose how intense you wanted it to be. In Dubai, you don't have that option. It's intense all the time. Before my break, this would not have been an option. It would always be, I want to be intense, I want to be on it. So now I know that I give myself the grace to enjoy my life, my family. So it's changed inherently. It's allowed me to be more risk-taking because I started my own company. And when you don't have the brands on your back, right, it's different. So my journey, I think, has been different. I started my own company, so I think that changed a lot.
I don't say, do you think more employees and more people should take gap years? But do you think, I mean, not everyone, that is a huge risk. I mean, that's insane. But do you think more and more professionals should take pause moments? You know, okay, if you can't take a year, take a month. If you can't take a month, take intentional time off and just disconnect completely. Do you think that also contributes to your innovative side as an individual?
I think absolutely. I think we didn't touch upon, how I learned from these communities, right? So I'll just before I answer that question, I'll just go in, some of the things that made me more innovative, right? Because one of my experience was that I was deep in the Amazon jungle, right? In a place called, Puerto Nereno, right? It's literally, you go to a city, Leticia, which is on the border of Peru, Brazil, and Colombia. And then you take like a 4-hour boat ride to get to this tribal village, which is now, and I was very surprised to see that in the middle of this Amazon jungle, it is still connected, right? And this is where I saw in real life, right, companies like Starlink, what value they're creating for those individuals there. I saw couples that are now, have created their own travel companies. I saw like businesses being more active and online and connected just because Starlink as the technology was there. I traveled to Colombia and I was with our son and my husband, and we were in this middle of the jungle. We stayed there for 3 nights, right? And this is where everything is really far away. So it's deep in the Amazon jungle. And with us was a guide and a shaman. A shaman is a spiritual head of a tribe. And he was our host for those 3 days. And he had perfect English. And I started having those conversations with him. And he was telling me that he has so many images of insects of the Amazon on his phone, over 4,000, right? Things that have not been recorded. And because of Instagram, he started posting them. And then he got connected to entities that were able to collaborate with him and publish those works. So you see this, and you see like the impact technology is making. So it really made me happy to see, that the work, because when you're working in organizations, you feel a bit siloed what is actually happening in the ground. So it was really nice to see those things.
And this is happening in the middle of the jungle, in the
absolutely.
Amazons.
Like what
someone is sitting and making an impact to the science just by uploading the photos of the insects.
And by being right there. Like when I saw because you opened a dedicated page on Instagram on the trip, she didn't just go sit on the 5-star hotels. She went deep into, the communities, into the forests, and that was wild.
Do you think your son would remember it? And what
I don't think my son,
he
was just, so when we started, he turned 3. So it was, he was very young. But I think fundamentally it did change him. And I'll give you an example, right? Like we were living in the UAE, and before that he had probably seen the wilds in the zoos or, in safaris. And he probably carried like a fly or an ant or a worm in his hand. And so I saw this change where, because we were in Central and South America, right, most of the language spoken was Spanish, right? And so he did not understand it, but he still tried to communicate with the kids. We saw that because we were moving every 4 or 5 days, so our schedule was very hectic. You're right, we did not stay in any 5-star. But we were also like very much on the move. So for him to, have like sometimes a nice hotel versus like sometimes a lower end Airbnb because we're in the middle of nowhere, right? That I think has fundamentally changed his acceptance to change and his appetite for change as well. And we're really appreciative. So I think that those fundamentals are always going to be a part of for him. I mean, heck, he tasted a grasshopper meal in Mexico and he pretended to love it. So I appreciate that risk taking.
There's nothing wrong with a grasshopper meal. I've had those.
Right?
Yeah, and it is
very crunchy and
delicious. Very crunchy.
Absolutely. So, okay, you asked me the question whether individuals should take
a pause.
Right? And
yeah.
I'm a big believer on that, right? Just because I know that how it changed myself. And I think, so a couple of years ago, I read this by this anthropologist, you all know Hariri, right? And I like the idea that longevity is increasing. It was Homo Deus. It was about, no, it was the other book, Sapiens, my bad. So it was, the point I liked was that we're all living longer, right? Our lifestyles are getting longer, we're living longer. And so the idea that we're gonna be stuck in one job, it's kind of sad, right? Thank you. Very spot on. It's sad. So like 40 years, you're going to be doing the same thing. And that's just boring. And so do you not owe it to your life to see what else is there? And so I would really encourage people to kind of take those breaks. And it doesn't mean that you take like a proper break from work, right? Because I know that everyone is scared about what if I don't get back on the ladder? But we also are in this opportunity where technology is changing things. So I was asked this question at another event, and my response to it was that if you feel that taking a break for even 6 months or 3 months without working is too much of a risk, then you can look at maybe exploring remote locations. For example, suppose that if you're a marketing person, or if you're a tech person, or you're a builder or software engineer, you might want to integrate it with some passion that you have. Maybe like, oh, you love scuba. So you go and you stay like, a week, a month, 3 months at a marine, biologist lab where you say, you know what, I want to contribute to this, right? So you're getting something different than being just in a work environment, but also exploring something different that creates more purpose to you as well. And I think that this whole work and taking a break is a great example of the signals, shifts, and systems thinking that I spoke about earlier. Is because a couple of years ago, right, this was very new. Oh, you're taking a gap year, right? And so, you would see these anecdotal information pop up where people are, where people are not working, like they take a pause, they take a break for different things, right? Then it started becoming more shifts, right? More shifts in the sense that now, countries started exploring freelance visas, remote visas, where you don't need to work in that company, but you can actually have a visa to live in that, right? So you start having this convergence. A lot of companies started coming up with programs, digital programs, to allow you to not be to work from anywhere, right? Or to have different options to start your own business, or even when it's a knowledge, session that you're giving, you don't need to be in a country that you live in, you work in, right? So you see those shifts, and then eventually it started becoming these policies, right? Where now there are actual business models that are being made due to the fact that people want to take days off. Like there are financial companies that are thinking, oh, I need to look at credit cards. There are insurance companies like Nomad Insurance that are coming out with packages saying, you know what, we've got a lot of people doing that. So it's been this process
Transition.
of from signals to shift, and now it actually has it's becoming more systems.
And there's a huge desire for meaningful work. I think we saw a lot of that during the pandemic, or after the pandemic, the Great Resignation, and people are asking the question, what am I doing? What am I living for?
Absolutely.
When you talk about enabling remote work, working virtually, does physical connection, working in teams physically, increase the ability to be innovative, or does it hamper innovation working remotely? How do teams innovate over networks?
I think very important question. And I feel that there is still, the verdict is out on this one. And I don't think there will ever be a verdict. It's sort of that example where there are always going to be individuals who are innovative in their own way. And you see a lot of startups, right, that they hired brilliant people, but those are a small group of people. They know what their purpose is, and they can deliver innovation even when they're remote. But for a lot of big companies, right, I think proximity is still super important, because the idea generation that happens when people are in a room, that would remain, I think, a status quo. I think the outlier is continuous innovation, not improvement, like proper innovation with people who are remote, right? And what the underlying issue is that there needs to be a deeper connection, within individuals. And I still feel that if a person is not knowledgeable, or it's not an expert, or there's a certain personality type that's required to have innovation being inculcated in remote teams. So that would still, I think, be the formula for success, or the percentage of ROI on that is still not as well as compared to proximity, because I think that, you know, being connected, that's still important.
And just to continue on that discussion, maybe it's not required for everyone to be innovative.
Absolutely. I think that it's you know, you always have this analogy that not everyone needs to be a leader. Some people just need to kind of, you know, or if you're a leader, managers are also important. You always have these kind of sayings, and I think it's the same. Not everyone needs to be innovative, and it depends on the individual's personality type and how satisfied they are in the role that they're playing in.
Yeah, I think one of the best things I've heard this week or this month, signals, shift systems. I just think it's just brilliant. What is your playbook? No, it's groundbreaking. I think I can't wait to see what you're going to do in that space, you know, over the years. If you don't mind sharing your playbook, you know, we get Asma on board the organization. P21 Consulting is on board. 21P Consulting is on board. If you don't mind highlighting a playbook to enable an organization innovate or become more innovative. I know you had touched on aspects of that, but probably as a quick highlight into.
Well, I'm not going to share my whole playbook.
Not the whole playbook, but, you know, as much as, you know,
I think for me, what's important when I go into a new organization is start to understand what networks exist within that organization. And what I mean by that is that you've got this leadership network, right? What are the cues they're sending to the rest of their employees? So for me, doing that assessment from a political communication perspective is really interesting. Not so much the processes, because processes can be changed, but to understand the personality of the company, the dynamics and the networks that exist, that's something that I focused really on. Is that, okay, who is the party? Do you have like proper sponsors? What are the sponsors going for ROI, or they're looking for being the lead in innovation, right? Because those things really inform what I would propose to a company. If a company does not have those networks of innovation, or individuals, right, looking at their strengths, right, if they don't have it, then, you know, you go along a different proposal of a strategy. But you already have innovative people that are really hungry to talk about stuff and all of those things, right? Then you would see that, okay, your baseline is a little different. So your culture essentially has fragmented units. So I just need to do a simple job of bringing it together, right? And then it becomes a conversation on building in the systems and processes. But I would like to, because I feel that, you know, for anything that I do, understanding the whys and who is delivering at the end of the day, that is important. You know, you need to understand who is in charge, because they're going to be, you know, different employees, and a lot of them take cues from their leadership and what exactly is the, you know, conversation that's happening company-wide.
On the same note, can you recommend the shortcuts from the innovation to the impact?
Quick wins.
The quick wins.
You know, because you're always going to hear, timing is always going to be the constraint you're going to have with leadership. You know, want to see results today or see results yesterday. So can we have quick wins in the innovation space?
And also increase the share of wins in these innovations and ideas, because most of the innovations are still experiments, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, look, every company, depending on their business value and business purpose, they're going to have different types of quick wins. What I normally do is I host like a lot of ideation sessions, and then there's this brain dump of ideas that happen, right? And that is where you do a very simple prioritization matrix where you say that this is easy to do and this is going to create those impact. And once you start plotting those ideas in that matrix, right, the quick wins become really easy. It might be a simple, you know, business model change that, you know, already you've been thinking about, or it might be an AI feature that you introduce that is just going to delight your customers, right? That can be an easy win. But, you know, a good process would be that, you know, have an ideation workshop, get your people together. Obviously, I think that having them from multiple functions is important, because you want to show that, you know, interconnection. That's where I think true innovation happens. And then have them brainstorm on either an opportunity or a problem, or maybe just make it blue sky, and then try to plot it. And then it becomes really easy. And, you know, I actually do that. I actually do this in my day-to-day life, in the sense that I use the same framework where I'm a person that likes to do everything, from learning how to drum to scuba dive. Yeah, like, and sometimes I get overwhelmed because my list, I like keeping lists. So my list is like these like 20 things that I want to do immediately. And I'm like, I don't have the time for it. So I prioritize that it's easy to do. It's going to create a lot of impact. So those are the things I need to focus on.
And I completely agree that bringing all the people from the different function and also vertically is very important, because that's when the innovation is happening. Not just
Absolutely.
one function or the horizontal C-level executive talking about what can be innovative.
And this is so key. I recently spoke at the data science event, and there was this conversation that asked, right, is AI important as a study, right? Or is data center important to actually have like a master's in? And I feel that at this point, we need to figure out, there are going to be certain things that AI is going to be doing very, very well. But what is ultimately going to be infused, right, is your passion and your skill. So if you're crazy about music, right, learn AI from the perspective of how it can actually change music. And this is where I think in the future, once a lot of algorithms and things have been made, it's really going to be integrating and creating value within a lot of different functions and industries. And this is where that interdisciplinary knowledge comes in play as well, because if you're able to connect the dots, then you're going to be a star.
Well, we wish we had more time, because this conversation can go on and on. We like to end the conversation on the podcast with a key question. What is your formula for impact?
Well, I think that different people measure ROI differently. For me, what is unique about me, right? And this is something, a lot of people have told me. So eventually you do this assessment of yourself, right? Is that what do you really bring to the table? And I think for me, creating impact is getting a bunch of people excited about taking the next couple of steps, right? And I don't want them to get to that finish line. It's just take the next couple of steps, and that's, for me, if I'm able to excite individuals towards that purpose, then I'm happy.
Well, we're excited about the signals, the shifts, the systems that are ahead of us and that we'll be taking advantage of, and the steps we will be taking advantage of as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.